She didn't blink, didn't push back, didn't even ask for clarification when they laid it out for her. Miss the shot and the hostage dies. They boxed her in, made her take the shot in front of senior federal officials, using a target that had been quietly tampered with and designed to fail. What they didn't realize was that the woman they were trying to crack was Riley Cross, a Navy SEAL sniper with more than 200 hours behind this exact optic, and a level of trigger discipline that isn't built on confidence or ego, but on repetition and control. So, before we get to the instant she squeezed the trigger and everything turned upside down, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure the bell is on. Because this time, they weren't just evaluating a sniper. They picked the wrong one to test. The convoy rolled in just after first light, the lead Humvee's tires grinding over gravel outside range control. A weathered sign on the chain-link gate read, Black Ridge Joint Training Facility, authorized access only. Past it stretched nearly 3 kilometers of modular shoot houses, precision lanes, and obstacle courses reclaimed from old border enforcement property. It wasn't a war zone, not even an active sector, just a pieced-together assessment site in the desert outside Arroyo Seco, New Mexico, dry, compacted, and easy to forget. Chief Petty Officer Riley Cross stepped down from the last vehicle without ceremony. Tan fatigues pressed, boots clean, a duffel tight over one shoulder, no visible hardware, no rifle on her back, and no attention drawn her way. She looked more like logistics support than one of the most capable long-range precision shooters currently rotating through active duty. Her orders were straightforward. A temporary advisory assignment. 2 weeks embedded to observe and co-lead an interagency qualification lane known as the Precision Decision Firing Course. Mostly a formality. A paperwork delay had pulled the original SEAL advisor at the last minute, and Cross was next in line with both clearance and availability. Inside range headquarters, the duty sergeant barely glanced up while checking her credentials. Cross, Riley. SEAL Team 4. Assignment Code Site 5. You're slotted for Lane 6 protocol evaluation. She nodded. Any issues so far? None officially logged, he said, hesitating before adding that she might want to take things slow, since the primary instructors had been running the place for a long time. She didn't comment, just signed the clipboard, clipped on her badge, and headed toward the instructor compound. At the edge of the gravel perimeter, 3 instructors stood under a slatted canopy, nursing burnt coffee and staring at the range like it owed them money. One leaned casually against the rail, a toothpick between his teeth. Relaxed posture, but eyes locked on her long before she arrived. That was Grant Holloway, master instructor, mid-40s, cut from the old federal cloth, former marshal-turned-trainer, twice deployed in advisory roles known for teaching under pressure. His name hadn't shown up in her prep packet, but his authority had. He ran lanes 4 through 7. Chief Cross, he said flatly, didn't expect Navy showing up this week. Joint certifications, she replied evenly. Sure, he said, dragging it out. On paper. The others laughed just enough to underline it. One muttered about checklist warriors, another threw an exaggerated salute. Cross ignored it. Inside the range shed, Holloway brought up the site schematic. Lane 6 is your precision decision course. Already set for Week 2 evaluations, mostly structured drills, simulated hostage IDs, shoot or don't shoot, judgment calls, standard range theory. He paused, his tone tilting. Pressure makes real shooters. She didn't rise to it and moved on. Lane 6 itself looked unremarkable at first. A long stretch of sandbag barriers, steel cover, and patched-together plywood meant to mimic rural compound windows. 600 yards downrange, rotating silhouettes waited. Human torsos painted half in civilian patterns, half in generic threat gear, silent, anonymous, and unforgiving. No flags to give it away, no audio prompts, just movement, timing, and silhouette. That was the point of the precision decision lane. One round, one decision, no follow-up. Riley Cross stood beneath the watch canopy at the control bench, her clipboard untouched on the table. Instead of checking boxes, she slipped off her boots and walked the lane barefoot, holding them in one hand, quietly reading the wind off the flags, watching how it bent and stalled. She studied how shadows broke across the first two barricades, where the light shifted too sharply, and where the berm dipped faster than it should near the southeast corner. Nothing was technically wrong, but every detail mattered. By Aero 900, the first group lined up, not students, but seasoned federal agents, local SWAT officers, and a few Marines cross-training for instructor certification. Every one of them experienced, every one of them trying not to stare while still figuring her out. Cross lifted the headset. "This lane is about speed, judgment, and control," she said, calm and clipped. "You'll see 3 fast presentations. 2 are hostile, 1 is not. You get 1 shot, no resets, no cues. Hit a friendly, and you're done. Hesitate too long, and that counts too." A few low snorts drifted through the line. She didn't react, clicked the mic off, and stepped back. That's when Grant Holloway moved in behind her, arms folded, sunglasses on, posture loose. "Academic setup," he said, just loud enough to carry. "Real shooters learn under pressure." She gave him a single glance, then faced the group. The murmurs died. "Then maybe this course isn't about stress," she said evenly. Holloway's jaw twitched, but he stayed quiet. Cross loaded the bench rifle, the action closing with clean mechanical certainty, then passed it to the first shooter without comment. The timer chirped. 3 targets swung out. 1 held a phone. 1 carried a weapon. 1 raised empty hands but moved late. The shot broke and missed. Above the lane, the red light flashed. "Casualty," the screen read. Holloway said nothing, but by the 3rd run, he'd already settled on a conclusion. As the afternoon wore on, most evaluators peeled off toward admin, faces burned by sun and repetition, paperwork tucked under their arms. Lane 6 stayed live, not because it was behind, but because someone wanted eyes on it. Cross stood alone near the rear barricade, checking the torque on the bench mount. No one had asked her to. No one had assigned it. She'd simply noticed a half-degree shift in the swivel after the 3rd run, small enough to dodge a checklist, big enough to throw a shot. A voice came from behind her, close enough to feel deliberate. She straightened and turned. Holloway stood there now without his shades, eyes sharp, expression flat. His hands rested on his hips, relaxed in a way that said he'd already made up his mind. "I verify what I'm responsible for," she said. He gave a thin smile. She didn't return it. Holloway stepped past her, gravel crunching under his boots, and leaned on the barricade. "Funny thing about this course," he said casually. She finished tightening the bolt. He chuckled. She met his gaze just long enough to acknowledge the challenge, not long enough to indulge it. Later, after sunset drained the heat from the range, she was packing her gear when the message came through from range control, short and formal. "Instructor demonstration requested. Lane 6, observers present." She read it twice, then again. She found Holloway near the instructor shed, already kitted up, speaking quietly with 2 federal supervisors. When he saw her, he didn't look surprised. "Command wants a demo," he said. "Optics." "I'm not assigned as a demonstrator," she replied. One supervisor cleared his throat. "Chief, respectfully, it's your lane and your standards." Holloway tilted his head slightly. There it was, not overt, not sloppy, but deliberate. Cross inhaled slowly, measured. I won't run a demo outside briefing parameters, she said. Holloway spread his hands. The supervisors exchanged a look. This had stopped being about policy. Now it was about posture. All right, one of them said at last. Live observers. Clean run. Grant Holloway's smile crept wider by a fraction. Riley Cross gave a single nod. As she turned to retrieve her rifle case, she caught motion near the edge of the shed, cameras already being mounted, target rails already being adjusted. This wasn't about instruction anymore. It was about watching her miss. And for the first time since arriving at Black Ridge, Cross realized the assignment had shifted. Not on paper, but in practice. The field lights snapped on one after another, washing Lane 6 in a harsh white glare. It wasn't fully dark, but the sun had dropped low enough behind the tree line to flatten everything into gray. Wind flags stiffened, the gravel cooled underfoot, shadows disappeared. Cross stepped onto the shoot-house platform, shoulders squared, her bolt-action rifle balanced in both hands. It was her own weapon, not a base-issued rig, and no one questioned it. She set it onto the rest without a word. Under the canopy, observers gathered, range supervisors, visiting agency liaisons, a couple of quiet military personnel with clipboards tucked close. No one spoke above a murmur. Holloway paced near the control panel, his relaxed grin still in place, though his hands moved with far too much familiarity across the console. He toggled settings, target order, wind modulation, silhouette calibration, each adjustment small, permitted, and deliberate. Cross adjusted her scope without looking up. Holloway kept his tone light. 3 targets, 2 threats. The screen above the line lit up. Demo mode, instructor, live fire. Lane 6, shooter, CPO Riley Cross. He stepped closer, voice carrying just enough. Let's make it interesting. He tapped another control. A 4th silhouette slid into view, a hostage figure, hands bound, eyes painted wide, a crosshair marker centered over the chest. Holloway's voice dropped, smile unchanged. The range went dead quiet. Cross settled her cheek to the stock. Her grip found the rifle naturally. Her pulse didn't jump. Her eyes didn't harden. She didn't speak because she already understood what the rest of them didn't and what Holloway had bet she'd miss. That 4th target wasn't part of any demonstration. It was a provocation, a trap placed under supervision and cameras. Decline the shot and it becomes insubordination. Step off the line and it reads as fear. Take the shot and you do it on his clock, under his conditions. A no-fail test with no margin. One mistake, one flicker of hesitation and the story wouldn't be hers to tell. Holloway leaned forward on the railing, arms folded. Clock's running, Chief. Behind him, observers shifted, unsure whether this was planned or not. No one stopped it. Through the scope, 4 silhouettes waited at staggered distances. One rotated slightly, one raised a weapon, one wore civilian markings. The hostage stood rigid, square to the line, no movement, no cover. Cross adjusted the parallax. Holloway gave a subtle, taunting nod. Pressure makes shooters. She didn't react. She blinked once and let the reticle float, not chasing, just hovering. 68 degrees, range wind, left drift, inconsistent, 4 amp in bursts. Mirage distortion mild. She dialed half a click to the right and settled deeper into the stock. Her breathing slowed, not forced, just even. The wind flag snapped once, then went still. The range held its breath, broken only by the hum of the lights overhead and the faint scratch of a pen behind her. Holloway stayed silent now. He didn't need to say anything, because this had stopped being about shooting skill. It was about control. Cross knew exactly what he'd done. The hostage target wasn't only psychological, it was physically offset. just under half a foot closer than regulation. The kind of deviation that only showed itself if you noticed the mirage bending differently at that distance. The kind that made a clean headshot look safe until the round drifted wide. A failure baked in, disguised as spontaneity, a staged scenario on a live lane. Cross breathed out through her nose and made a barely perceptible elevation adjustment. Her support hand stayed steady beneath the stock, fingertips resting lightly against the bipod leg. She didn't speak, and she didn't move, letting her heart tick once, then again. There was no visualization, no mental hype, no adrenaline ritual. She was stripping away noise. Grant Holloway's voice drifted back, light and almost bored. "You freezing, Chief?" She didn't blink or flinch. The reticle slid off the first silhouette, past the one holding a rifle low, crossed the hostage in the center and stopped, not from pressure but from observation. Just above the painted duct tape around the wrists, she saw it. A legacy target model, an old press with a slight left shoulder plate warp, a flaw that bent light just enough to betray the true angle. Once you saw it, the math solved itself. Her breathing stayed even. Her voice stayed level. For the first time in 2 minutes, she spoke, confirming hostile on the leftmost silhouette. She pressed the trigger, smooth and controlled, no yank, no jerk. The shot cracked, muted but sharp, echoing downrange as the rifle recoiled cleanly into her shoulder. All 4 silhouettes shuddered, but only one fell. The far left target dropped back on its hinge, neutralized. The hostage target never moved. No splash, no edge strike, no velocity deviation, a clean pass through empty space. For a beat, the range stayed silent. No applause, no reaction, just the uneasy tension of people unsure whether they'd just witnessed luck, defiance, or something they didn't have a name for. Holloway stood frozen, eyes locked downrange. Riley Cross rose from prone with deliberate calm, locked the bolt to the rear, the chamber clicking open, then turned and handed the rifle to the armorer without looking back. For her, the calculation was finished. The bullet had already spoken. The moment didn't hit all at once, it rolled in quietly, like a hush spreading under the canopy. 1 target down, hostage untouched, 3 others still standing and resettable, but the lane was over. Holloway didn't move at first. Both hands braced on the control panel, still squinting at the far berm as if his mind hadn't caught up. The other instructors lingered behind him, silent. No one knew if they'd just seen a standard pass or something far more dangerous. The overhead display answered before anyone could. Live shot recorded. Hostage safe. Threat neutralized. Green indicator. 0 deviation. No anomalies. A visiting federal observer exhaled softly, relief tangled with disbelief. Another instructor wrote something down without lifting his eyes. Cross didn't say a word. She walked to the edge of the range, bolt still open, weapon safe, unloading with the same careful precision she'd practiced 1,000 times before. Holloway finally straightened and forced a thin, tight smirk, as if it had all gone according to plan. Cross paused only long enough to close the rifle case, snap the latches, and walk away. No gesture, no victory lap, no speech about composure under fire, just execution and exit. Behind her, the observers stayed locked in that quiet discomfort that only institutional men feel when someone exceeds the limits they were meant to fail. They knew, even if they couldn't say it yet, what Holloway had tried to do. The silence settled and carried weight, the kind that makes people exchange looks instead of words, the kind that comes right before someone asks to see the logs. It didn't take long. 20 minutes after Cross cleared the platform, one clipboard passed hands, then another, followed by a hushed exchange under the canopy between a federal observer and the system's tech monitoring the lane. Cross had already secured her gear and returned to the instructor prep area when the tech approached carefully. "Chief, we're reviewing the demo's digital log." She gave a single nod. "You'll want the tower-side data as well." The tech blinked. "It's included," she said simply. He hesitated. Cross never looked up. The tech gave a small nod and walked away. Inside the operations trailer, 2 additional instructors drifted in behind him as he pulled up the record. "Standard review," one of them said, leaning closer. "Timestamp overlay, thermal readouts, sensor feedback from the decision lane." The tech shook his head slightly. "I'm checking ballistic alignment logs." He zoomed in. Target 4, the hostage silhouette, showed a manual position override logged 15 minutes before the live demo. User credential, Grant Holloway. Holloway frowned. That would have been calibration. The tech didn't answer. He scrolled again. 2 more entries surfaced. Mirage field dampener disabled at 48 meters. Same user ID. Another observer stepped into the trailer. The tech glanced at him, then back to the log, then at Holloway. Holloway's voice tightened. "No," he said, but the data was clear. Unauthorized reconfiguration during an active certification run. The word moved fast, faster than anyone could slow it. By the time Cross was called back to the ops trailer, quietly but firmly, 2 base command officers were already inside, studying the same log on a mirrored screen. No raised voices, no chest thumping, just silence. Cross stood with her hands clasped behind her back, eyes on the data. Captain Lewis Harrow, the site commander, turned toward her. She answered immediately. "Yes, sir. I noted target offset and irregular light diffusion." "There was no equipment failure," she said evenly. "Only interference." Harrow nodded once and turned to Holloway. "You're relieved of instructor duties, effective immediately." Holloway opened his mouth, but nothing came out. There was nothing to argue. It wasn't Cross who had failed. It was the trap. The debrief room smelled of old varnish and machine oil. No windows, just a long table, 4 steel chairs, and a digital display frozen on a frame from the incident log. Holloway sat stiff in the second chair, arms crossed, jaw locked, his boot tapping an uneven rhythm against the concrete. Across from him, Captain Harrow reviewed the report, flanked by a legal observer and a federal program auditor. Cross sat off to the side, not opposite, not engaged, not needed. She had already said everything worth saying, and she hadn't raised her voice once. Harrow cleared his throat. "Manual override of course parameters without briefing authorization," he read. "Alteration of mirage dampening and target placement during live fire." Holloway stayed silent. Harrow set the tablet down. "You were responsible for shooter safety. You violated that responsibility under full observation. This was not an error." Holloway still said nothing, only the faint grind of his jaw filling the room. Harrow looked to the legal observer. The stylus tapped once. "Proceedings filed. Immediate removal from the instructor certification track." Harrow nodded, then turned to Cross. "Chief?" She lifted her eyes, calm and steady. "Only this," she said. "Snipers don't panic. They calculate. What he created wasn't pressure." She stood quietly. The room held still for a beat. Then Harrow gave a short nod. "Understood, Chief." Cross walked out without looking back. The door closed behind her. Inside, Harrow replayed the final clip one last time, the frame holding on perfect stillness just before the shot. Just a few seconds of Cross at full draw, breathing slow, completely still, the legal officer said quietly. "There's steel in her spine." Captain Lewis Harrow didn't reply. He simply watched the round strike again in clean, clinical silence. On the screen, the green indicator pulsed once more. By the next morning, the range had settled back into quiet. No audience, no observers, just boots crunching on gravel and the distant rattle of a weapons rack being restocked behind the barracks. Riley Cross walked the perimeter alone. No rifle, no clipboard, only a thermos in one hand and a rolled target sheet tucked under her arm. Lane 6 had already been reset, silhouettes pulled back, sensors zeroed. From a distance, it looked like nothing had happened, and for most people it hadn't, but the instructors knew. The trainees did too. As she passed the motor pool, one of the Marines from the previous day gave her a small nod. No words, just recognition. A few steps later, a federal SWAT candidate shifted aside to give her room without being asked. By the time she reached the admin trailer, 2 instructors had already cleared out of the break room, not out of fear, but because what they'd ignored before now carried weight. At the bench near the target rig, an assistant range officer handed her a sealed folder. "Final log updates for your rotation." She took it without comment. "He ask?" the officer added. Cross shook her head. "No." As she turned to leave, she passed the instructor bulletin board. Her name was no longer under instructor or observer. It had been moved to a 3rd column, a rare designation reserved for those who didn't just pass the program, but proved they could endure it. Downrange, a single clean shot rang out. Distant and precise, tight report, perfect spacing. A student, most likely, following her numbers now, her rhythm, her standard. Cross paused once, glanced down the lane, and let the warmth of the thermos sink into her hand against the cold metal wall. Then she walked off the line again, just like before, without noise, without permission, and without needing to explain a damn thing. If you were forced into a shot you never authorized, would you take it, or walk away and risk being blamed for everything? And when real skill shows itself, does it speak louder under pressure or in the moments when everyone else wants you to fail? Should instructors ever engineer failure just to make a point? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every one. Hit like if you respect those who stay steady under fire. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next mission. We post stories like this every day, and the next one might hit even harder. Share this with someone who knows precision isn't luck. It's the refusal to miss when it matters most. Your next story should already be on screen. Go watch it. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place, same